I grew up in Sapporo, Japan. Very traditional Japanese upbringing. Father was a fighter pilot, fighting against the Kilrathi. Now the Kilrathi are an alien race, essentially giant cats, heavily resembling the Imperial Japan of World War II, mixed with South America tribes such as the Aztecs, kind of like me and my father. He died fighting the Kilrathi, and of course I was heartbroken by it. I mourned him, then followed in his footsteps in joining the academy to become a fighter pilot for the Confederation. Now the Confederation some would know as the South in the American Civil War, who sought to break off from the country, the Union, over states' rights, race matters, slavery. That will be important later. This Confederation was different. They didn't mean it like the Confederates. This Confederation, Confed, was the union of planets including the border worlds who were united against the Kilrathi in their war to conquer the galaxy. That was why I joined the academy, to fight against the Kilrathi as a fighter pilot. Now, even back then, and through my career, it has been suggested I was a little uptight, a little too invested in the traditional Japanese style or stereotype, too similar to the Zero fighters, the Japanese kamikaze pilots at Pearl Harbor, something that bit me in an amusing way. When part of our training was hand-to-hand combat in the event we needed it, we were drilled in Marine hand-to-hand, basically straight-up punching. We had American Force Recon trainers. We had mixed martial arts, again taught by Special Forces, and we were taught wrestling. Greco-Roman wrestling to be exact. Well-hard wrestling. And I showed up proudly wearing this old-timey Japanese wrestling attire, basic Joshi Japan attire. This did not escape the notice of the short, bad-tempered instructor, nor the wrestlers who were to help train us. They were amused, sort of, and the instructor singled me out to help demonstrate the moves we were to learn. A further amusing story from this. Later on, when I was assigned to the Tiger's Claw, we had a pilot as part of the flight roster. They were assigned to my squadron, and they were actually, before becoming a fighter pilot, a pro wrestler. As a distraction from the conflict, they put on pro wrestling. You know, the staged wrestling. Choreographed. Fake, but they hate the term fake. Me and some of the other pilots, including one of my dear friends in Jeanette Devereaux, callsign Angel, laughed ourselves silly watching it. Jean, surprisingly, got quite involved in it. Even suggested trying it herself. I doubt she was taken seriously. I know she would have definitely been taken up on it if she was. Anyway, I graduated as a yeoman, and part of the assignment was to be a drill instructor to students who joined the academy after me, including Todd Marshall, callsign Maniac, and Christopher Blair, callsign Maverick. Unfortunately for Todd, he joined the academy as a screw-up, a troublemaker, someone who needed discipline, and I was assigned as the drill instructor for his class. I had to get in his face because of his mess-ups. I also trained Todd, Chris, and the other students. Of course, I put my heart and soul into it. Someone must have a sense of humor, as on their graduation, myself, Todd, and Chris were to be assigned to the TCS Tiger's Claw, renowned for their roster and squadrons of ace pilots. Even I felt a sense of pride in trying to add to that legacy. During my time at the academy, I would associate with numerous veteran pilots who had already been assigned to other carriers and were at the academy for one purpose or another, training or drilling students mainly. One such pilot, a giant Australian woman with the attitude to match, named Brittany Anderson, callsign Blaze. Brittany would serve well in being familiar with how Australians are, and would be part of the reason why I got along very well with Ian St. John, callsign Hunter, also Australian and having that similar personality. Well, Brittany, she thought I would be tired of yelling at recruits after hearing about me again having to go after Todd, and suggested taking a break. I had to admit she had a point, and accepted the offer of a girls' night out, away from the officers' club and going to off-base pubs and clubs. It was at one such bar that I met Philip. Philip was a member of the medical corps in Confed. Very sweet, very tough. Picture Stephen Amell, that Arrow actor, or his character. He was looking at us women as a group. The same woman who invited me out caught him, and rather than get mad like I expected, brought him over to meet up. She thought Philip was eyeing her up, fancied her, as well as me and a few of the other women there. She tried to push me and Philip together. I was by no means ignorant of the concept of romance and casual relations. Some of the stories I heard from the students at the academy were eye-raising. Just the same, I was happy for them, even if that wasn't me. But with Philip, with Brittany's influence, and possibly the alcohol, I very much acted, well, not like how you might think, how I might not have expected of myself. But to cut a very long, involved, personal and sometimes highly inappropriate story short, me and Philip got together. Very much together. To the point he would see me on the claw and was well liked by the other members of the flight roster and crew, male and female both. I think Maya Mercedes, the chief flight tech, she fancied him, but then again she fancies most everyone. And I know Philip liked Jean, but he was absolutely loyal to me. Something that, again, knowing that men and women stray cheat, I was grateful for. Aside from relationships, my time on the Claw was certainly eventful. We began with trying to liberate the Vega sector, a collection of galaxies that were under attack by the Kilrathi. I flew with Chris. Being the more experienced pilot, I would try and impart my wisdom onto him. As did the other veteran pilots, Chan Michael. I would even try and emulate some of the things they did in the cockpit. Major Casey, callsign Iceman if you were curious, when engaged with the Kilrathi in an asteroid field, he would fly at high speed, dodging at the last possible second. The enemy would not always successfully follow. I wanted to try that. I was called out on it when I got the opportunity to do so. My wingman sardonically told me off for hotshotting. Anyway, we eventually liberated the Vega sector at Venice. Chris and Ian took out the Kilrathi starbase and our victory was assured. A hard-fought win for the worlds that were under attack by the enemy. Later we were called to try and prevent an attack by the Kilrathi on Goddard, a colony who detected the enemy. On the way we had to detour to prevent another attack, and by the time we reached Goddard we were too late. What was left, so I was told and saw, was horrifying. The destruction, loss of life was bad enough. It was the sheer devastation of what the Kilrathi used, like nothing close to what we had seen. Picture the terror of the nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki for comparison, not just the sheer power of the weapons, but the fact it was so needless. That same day, as the consequences of our failure began to sink in as we headed into the night, the true horror of what might happen if the Kilrathi were not stopped hit us. If we were driven out, forced to retreat, or were killed, then there was nothing to stop the Kilrathi from committing other attacks and atrocities with this weapon. Slave raids was a hotly discussed issue. We knew what the Kilrathi did to their prisoners. Numerous pilots had savage nightmares about it. Kind of ironic the Confederation would be trying to stop slavery instead of fighting for its preservation. And as good as we were, our pilots' roster were, we weren't covert ops, and being tasked to hunt down and destroy this secret weapon the Kilrathi had was a covert operation, behind enemy lines, potentially a one-way trip, suicide mission. And as good as we were, some of us began to crack under the pressure. Todd, and James, they found it hard to cope, to survive. I knew it was hard myself, especially because during this time Epsilon Station was attacked. That was where Philip was serving. Between my time before joining the Claw and our victory in the Vega sector, we had become very close. We were even going to marry, but it had to be put off because of this damn war. Because of the strike on Goddard. But the threat to my fiancé, the possibility Philip would be taken from me, much as I was distraught by it, I had to remain focused on the mission, including one particular mission with Chris. Now, to explain why this was important, there was a story of a carrier that was captured by the Kilrathi, the Guinevere. So the story goes that Kilrathi would use this ghost ship, flying Confed colors, to lure others to their doom. Well, during our pursuit of the Kilrathi and their secret weapon they used on Goddard, we received a distress signal from the Johan. I volunteered myself and Chris for the rescue mission. Normally I wouldn't have done that, but I think in hindsight it was Philip that caused me to do so. Also in hindsight I might have made a mistake doing so. We found out that the Johan had been destroyed. The Kilrathi had seized the Confed fighters for themselves and added them to the Guinevere. We were able to destroy the Phantom ship so the Kilrathi could no longer use it as a weapon of terror. Speaking of which, everyone was struggling under the pressure of our mission and the consequences should we fail. Myself included. Colonel Halcyon believed me to be depressed, with possibly losing my fiancé. It was not so. I had to distract myself, focus on our mission. Otherwise I would go crazy like the others. Should we win, I would celebrate Philip or no Philip, in ways even Brittany would be impressed by. And drunk, yelling, swearing. But not before. Not when we were under such strain. With that said, I could not help but think about the Johan. About those brave Conf pilots forced to fly for the Kilrathi. I could not begin to imagine what would cause them to be made to betray the Confederation like that. A legendary pilot, callsign Reaper, discussed Manchurian candidates, brainwashing and torture. MK Ultra, the CIA used it. Reaper worked Black Ops. Knew the story from Black Ops. Raised that as possibility. I tried to believe Philip to be too strong were he in that position, difficult as it was to picture. I admitted that were it me I would rather die. Better death than dishonor and betrayal. Like I said, we were all beginning to crack under the pressure. I was certainly not immune. But Jean, Angel, despite looking to handle it the best, she actually had it the worst. The reason why very few people know this, but you remember how the Kilrathi would take prisoners? Slaves? Of course I was terrified for Philip because of it, as well as the other victims at the hands or claws of the Kilrathi. Numerous members of Confed, the border world's civilians, they had dreadful nightmares over it. But the captain of the TCS She-Queen, with the battle carrier group of the Vega fleet, he completely lost it. He was studying our actions as best he could, tracking our mission, and it was discovered that should we fail, he intended to fly in with the Queen, rescue as many people as he could, then destroy the colony's bases as well as kill everyone who he couldn't save, whether Confed or civilian. This such horrifying plan, he saw it was better he kill them than for the Kilrathi to take them prisoner. The fact he didn't look and sound insane despite having this plan was horrifying. But most terrifying of all was that I could understand his reasoning if not agree with it. Well, his mad plan was discovered, but it could not be made public. If it did, Confed would look bad, lose support, and all the atrocities committed by the Kilrathi would be justified and cause them to do much worse. The Kilrathi would do far worse anyway, but they did not need an excuse. Well, Angel was contacted, informed, and were we to destroy the Kilrathi's secret weapon, she was to send a countersign so the mad captain could be made to stand down. The fact those colonies the Kilrathi could have hit, that the She-Queen could have attempted to wipe out, are still here today would tell you that we did succeed, though not without incredible strain. The She-Queen's captain, thankfully the only casualty of his plan, with his career over and in the care of a mental facility, is evidence enough of that. Again, the colonel believed I had suicidal idealization, fantasies of self-sacrifice. Something a few others have called me out on. It wasn't true then, and despite it all then, it wasn't true now. All I wanted was to accomplish our mission. Get the job done and get the hell out of there. And my fiancé to be returned to me, that would be nice too. After that incredible stress, we were given well-deserved shore leave. But that would have to be pushed back because there was this world, another alien race, the Firika. Think giant birds, parakeets to be precise. A fellow pilot compared them to the Turians from the old space combat game Mass Effect. We were able to have the treaty signed and we joined up with the TCS Austin. We conducted joint operations with veterans on the Claw, flying with the Austin's trainees, me among them. Well, the trainee I had would not listen, not even when I tried to act the drill instructor, and he was killed in an ambush. And of course I was distraught by his death, by him refusing to listen to me, by not knowing of Philip's fate. But I would find out during the liberation of Firika. My fiancé was among the prisoners taken by the Kilrathi. And I nearly lost it. I wasn't just mad, angry, I was furious. Not even when my father died did I hate the enemy. But on learning this, I saw red. I remembered hearing stories of the Earth Navy SEALs when they were in Vietnam. Highly racist reactions to one of them being killed by the Viet Cong. That was how I felt. Right then I hated all Kilrathi. I didn't care. They took my fiancé from me. And it was hard to remain composed, almost impossible to not obsess over avenging Philip, rescuing him. Thankfully, no one dared suggest he was already a dead man. I thought it myself, that was perhaps the only reason, knowing there was nothing I could do that prevented me from going owl and rogue. Captain Raganahalas, he defected from the Kilrathi. I had composed myself by the time we met him. He had some rather interesting information. The Kilrathi had set their sights on the Firika home world. We knew that. One pilot suggested they were on a lunch order, and despite it all I couldn't help but laugh, which helped. The interesting part was their homeworld was selected as the site for a Kilrathi holy ritual, something to do with their god Siva, which would be seeking a religious or supernatural way to win the war, with Confed looking to stop it. Hokey hocus pocus it may seem, but a valuable target nonetheless. This plan was discovered by Prince Thraketh. He was like number 2 in the Empire. He challenged us. Were we to retreat, we could escape with our lives. Colonel Halcyon pretended to, while secretly launching a marine raid on the Kilrathi ceremony. They successfully stopped it, killing their priestess and the honor guard, but at great cost. Again Thraketh made contact. We would lose the Marines, the Firika, but could escape with our lives. We had no choice but to concede, hoping that we had done enough. We had done enough. Disrupting the ceremony galvanized the Firika to liberate themselves and drive off the Kilrathi. Not long after this, the Tiger's Claw was ambushed, destroyed. I was one of the survivors. Wouldn't be here to talk to you otherwise, would I? And Chris was accused of treason because Confed refused to believe his story of stealth fighters. I didn't believe Chris would betray us for a second, but as pointed out by that mercenary I mentioned before, they needed someone to blame. Better that there be a traitor than the idea that Kilrathi had such technology could accomplish the Claw's destruction. Said mercenary followed the matter very closely and tried to find evidence one way or another. Chris ended up only being found guilty of negligence, and just like the Shea Queen's captain would have little future in Confed. As for me, like the rest of the Claw's survivors, I would be reassigned, and I would receive offers from other pilots who knew what happened to me, what happened to Philip, to break away from the rank and file and go after Kilrathi prison camps and slave mines in a bid to find him. I turned them all down. Of course I loved my fiancé dearly, desperately wanted him back. But that would not help the Confederation, much as I wanted it. Even if I wasn't capable of freeing Philip, you could be damn certain that I would avenge him. And that's my story up to this point. A lot to take in. And there's sure to be a lot more if we survive. And to add to this, I should go into my personality. Think the best way is to describe how others see me. Well, I'd scoff at the suggestion of being a modern-day samurai living by the Bushido code of honor. But I must admit that I very much come across that way. More than once I was compared to a ninja, instead sneaky, willing to do anything to win, regardless of honor. I like that, with the possible exception of the lack of honor bit, and the idea of being a little uptight. But I am credited with not being as bad as I could be, as much of the stereotype as you might think. Just very traditional, very kind, very sweet, and not as submissive as you might think. In fact, it might surprise you that between me and Philip it could be argued, successfully, that I was the dominant one. And as I said before, knowing the dangers of dwelling, obsessing, and fighting against it, trying to focus on our war against the Kilrathi but not allowing it to be all-consuming either.